I never thought the most entitled thing I would ever witness would happen to me, in my own home, and involve my own family. For most of my life, I learned to stay quiet, stay useful, and stay out of the way. That was the only way to survive in a house where love was handed out selectively, and I was never the chosen one. My older brother Jabari was always the miracle child, the one who could do no wrong, no matter how destructive his behavior became. I learned early that fairness did not exist in my family, only favoritism. Growing up, everything revolved around Jabari. His moods set the tone. His mistakes were excused. His cruelty was reframed as confidence. Our mother Patricia treated him like proof that she had done something right in life, while I was treated like an afterthought she merely tolerated. Anytime he lashed out at me, she explained it away. Anytime I succeeded, she minimized it. Our father Samuel stood by silently, watching it all happen, choosing peace over protection every single time. Before we go on, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I really do read every comment. By the time we were adults, the damage was already done. Jabari grew up believing the world owed him loyalty, forgiveness, and endless second chances. I grew up believing I had to earn the right to exist. Therapy later taught me words like emotional neglect and scapegoat child, but back then, all I knew was that I felt invisible. I stayed invisible on purpose. I studied. I worked. I built a life that did not depend on anyone else. Ironically, being ignored gave me freedom. While Jabari partied, failed classes, and coasted on our parents' support, I buried myself in school. I graduated with top honors, earned a full scholarship to a prestigious university, and later built a career that allowed me to support myself comfortably. I married my husband, Andre, and we have been together for 3 years now. He knows every ugly chapter of my past and never once made me feel like I was too much for having one. Jabari's life went in the opposite direction. He married Naomi, a kind, gentle woman who softened him in ways no one else ever could. Their 2 children, Noah and Kayla, adored her. She was their safe place. Then, 3 months before everything fell apart, Jabari caused a car accident. Naomi survived, but she slipped into a coma and didn't wake up. The doctors couldn't promise anything. The children cried themselves to sleep, asking for their mother every night. Instead of stepping up, Jabari unraveled. Barely 3 months after his wife was hospitalized, he introduced a new girlfriend named Latoya. He moved fast, ignored his grieving children, and acted like Naomi was already gone. That alone should have warned me of what kind of man my brother truly was. I just didn't know yet how far he was willing to go. After Naomi slipped into the coma, the house changed completely for Noah and Kayla. They went from a home filled with warmth and routine to one ruled by chaos and avoidance. Jabari stopped cooking real meals. Laundry piled up. School permission slips went unsigned. The kids talked about their mom constantly, asking when she would wake up, asking if they could visit her again, asking if she could hear them when they talked to her. Jabari brushed them off every time, telling them to stop being dramatic and to get used to how things are now. I tried to help where I could. I stopped by with groceries, helped with homework, took the kids to see Naomi when the hospital allowed visitors. Noah would hold his mother's hand and whisper about his day at school, his voice shaking as he fought back tears. Kayla would crawl into the hospital bed beside her and beg her to wake up. Watching that broke something in me. Watching Jabari stand in the corner scrolling on his phone while his children grieved broke whatever was left. Latoya moved in not long after. She didn't try to bond with the kids. She didn't ask about Naomi. She treated the house like a temporary stopover and the children like inconvenient luggage. I heard her once complain that Jabari was still too tied down and that he needed a break. Apparently, Jabari agreed. The call came on a Saturday morning. I was still in my pajamas, coffee untouched on the counter, when my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Noah and Kayla were standing there with backpacks and overnight bags. Kayla's eyes were red and puffy. Noah looked like he was trying very hard to be brave. They told me their dad was going on vacation for 8 weeks. They said he told them I would be watching them. No warning, no discussion, no consent. Just abandonment dressed up as a favor. I let them inside because they were children and because they were scared. Then I called Jabari. He ignored the first several calls. When he finally answered, he spoke like this was already settled. Like my life was simply available for him to rearrange. I told him no. I told him I was not watching his children for 2 months. I told him he needed to come get them immediately, or I would call Child Protective Services. That was when his tone changed. That was when the entitlement turned into something darker. He threatened me. Calmly. Precisely. He said he would call my employer and tell them I was unstable, that I wasn't taking my medication, that I was a danger in the workplace. He said people like me didn't deserve good jobs anyway. He knew exactly where to aim because my career was the one thing I had built without him. I hung up shaking. The kids were sitting on my couch, clutching their bags, trying not to cry. I realized then that this was no longer just about me saying no. This was about protecting 2 children who had already lost their mother in every way that mattered. I didn't know what to do next, and the fear sat heavy in my chest. I had responsibilities, deadlines, and a carefully balanced life that Jabari was now trying to bulldoze through. But more than that, I had 2 children in my living room who had just been discarded like an inconvenience. Noah kept asking if he had done something wrong. Kayla sat quietly, holding a stuffed animal and staring at the floor. I told them they were safe, even though I didn't feel safe myself. The only person I could think to call was our mother. Part of me already knew how that conversation would go, but I was desperate. Patricia arrived later that afternoon with the same cold expression she had worn my entire life. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't check on the kids. She told me I was being selfish and dramatic, just like always. She said Jabari deserved a break. She said family helps family. She said the children were old enough to adjust. When I asked her what kind of parent leaves their children behind while their wife is in a coma, her mouth tightened and she changed the subject. Eventually, after enough pressure, she admitted the truth. Jabari wasn't on a normal vacation. He was flying out with LaToya, funded by someone else, and planned to be gone the entire 8 weeks. Something inside me snapped. I told my mother she had raised a man who abandoned his children and thought money could replace responsibility. She told me I had always been jealous of Jabari, and that no matter what I achieved, I would never be as valuable as him. Those words hurt more than I expected, even after all these years. The argument escalated fast. When I told her to leave my house, she refused. When I tried to guide her toward the door, she shoved me. I stumbled into my coffee table, knocking over a vase my husband Andre had given me. It shattered across the floor. The sound was sharp and final, like something breaking inside my chest. I screamed for her to get out and threatened to call the police. She left eventually, but not before reminding me that I would always be alone without my family. When the door finally closed, I collapsed on the floor and cried until I couldn't breathe. The kids heard everything. That realization hurt almost as much as the fight itself. That night, I ordered food, let them watch movies, and tried to act normal. When they finally fell asleep, I went upstairs and called Andre. He listened quietly as I broke down and told him everything. When I finished, he didn't tell me to calm down or forgive anyone. He told me my brother was committing crimes and that I needed to protect myself and those kids. He told me to gather evidence, because people like Jabari only get louder when they think they're untouchable. For the first time since this began, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. Andre suggested something that scared me, but made sense. He told me to call Jabari again and let him talk. Let him threaten. Let him say everything out loud and record it. I hated the idea of provoking him, but Andre was right. Jabari had spent his entire life believing there would never be consequences. Men like that incriminate themselves easily. Before I made the call, I focused on the kids. I remembered what it felt like to be unwanted, to feel like a burden adults passed around. I refused to let Noah and Kayla feel that way in my home. We played games, ordered pizza, and for a few hours, the house felt lighter. Noah laughed for the first time since he arrived. Kayla curled up next to me on the couch and fell asleep with her head on my arm. That night, while they were distracted downstairs, I went into my bedroom and called Jabari again. I stayed calm. I asked him what would happen if I contacted Child Protective Services. He exploded exactly the way Andre predicted. He said he would destroy my reputation. He said nobody would believe someone like me over him. He mocked my mental health and told me I was nothing without my job. He repeated it over and over, louder each time, like saying it enough would make it true. I recorded everything. The next morning, before the kids woke up, I called Child Protective Services. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to sit down on the kitchen floor while I talked. I explained that the children had been abandoned under false pretenses, that their mother was in a coma, and that their father was threatening me to force compliance. When I played the recording, the agent went quiet. Then she told me an investigation would be opened immediately. I thought that would be the worst part. I was wrong. The following morning, I woke up to violent pounding on my front door. Before I could fully process what was happening, the door flew open. Jabari stormed in with a massive man I had never seen before. Our mother followed behind them. The stranger grabbed me and threw me aside like I weighed nothing. I hit the wall hard enough to see stars. The kids ran out of the guest room crying. I tried to get to them, but the man blocked me. Jabari yelled orders like this was his house. He told the man to take the kids to the car. Noah screamed. Kayla clung to my leg. I tried to pull them back and was slammed into the wall again. My mother stood there watching, crying, but doing nothing. Before leaving, Jabari walked over to me, leaned down, and spit in my face. Then they were gone. I lay on the floor shaking, my body aching, my house silent. When I could finally move, I called the police. I gave them everything. Descriptions, the license plate, the threats, the assault. My voice didn't even sound like mine anymore. That was the moment I understood something clearly. This was no longer about family drama. This was about survival. The police took me seriously immediately. They already had an open line with Child Protective Services because of the report I had filed the day before. When I described the man Jabari brought into my home and the way he assaulted me, the officer's tone shifted from calm to urgent. I gave them the license plate number from memory, surprised myself by how clearly it came back to me. Trauma sharpens certain details in a way nothing else can. After I hung up, the adrenaline wore off and I collapsed into a full panic attack. My house felt wrong without the kids. Too quiet. Their shoes were still by the door. Kayla's stuffed animal was still on the couch. I couldn't stop picturing them scared and confused, dragged out of the only place they had felt safe in months. The thought made me sick. Hours later, The police called me back. They had located the vehicle. What happened next sounded unreal, like something from a crime show instead of my life. When officers attempted to stop the SUV, the man Jabari brought with him attacked them. He charged forward despite guns drawn, struck multiple officers, and was shot in the leg. Jabari also became violent during the arrest. Both men were taken into custody. The kids were removed from the scene and placed under protective care. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt hollow. Knowing Noah and Kayla were safe, but not with me, hurt more than I expected. I called Child Protective Services repeatedly, asking if I could see them, talk to them, do anything. The answers were always the same. Not yet. The investigation was ongoing. The next blow came the following morning at work. I was called into an urgent meeting with my supervisors. Sitting across from them, I knew exactly what had happened before anyone spoke. A family member had contacted them, claiming I was unstable and unmedicated. They said they had been given detailed concerns about my mental health. I had prepared for this. I handed them letters from my doctor, my therapist, and my psychiatrist. Records showing years of consistent treatment, stability, and compliance. I explained the situation calmly, clearly, without emotion. When they finished reading, the atmosphere in the room shifted. One of them apologized. Another congratulated me on my recent performance. The meeting ended quickly. When I left the building, I laughed for the first time in days. Not because it was funny, but because Jabari's plan had failed completely. He called me from jail later that day, screaming, demanding bail money, blaming me for everything. I didn't take the call. Weeks passed. Jabari was formally charged. Child Protective Services continued their investigation. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from the hospital. Naomi had woken up. She was weak, disoriented, and heartbroken when she learned what had happened. I went to see her immediately. I brought pictures of the kids, clothes, comfort items, anything that might help ground her. She cried when she saw me and thanked me over and over for protecting her children when she couldn't. I promised her something in that hospital room. I told her she and the kids would not face the aftermath of Jabari's choices alone. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't making that promise out of fear or obligation. I was making it because I finally knew my worth. Naomi's recovery was slow, but every small improvement felt like a victory. She had to relearn simple things, rebuild strength, and process months of lost time all at once. The doctors warned her about stress, but there was no way to shield her completely from the truth. Jabari was in custody. The children were in protective care. Her marriage, as she knew it, was over. Still, even in her weakest moments, she asked about Noah and Kayla before she asked about herself. I became her bridge to the world she had missed. I coordinated with doctors, spoke to social workers, and made sure she had everything she needed in the hospital. Andre stood beside me through all of it, steady and calm, reminding me to eat, to sleep, to breathe. Watching him help Naomi without hesitation made me fall in love with him all over again. He never treated her like a burden or a complication. He treated her like family. Child Protective Services finally allowed supervised visits. The first time Noah and Kayla saw their mother awake, they broke down sobbing. Noah clung to her bed rail, his voice cracking as he told her he had tried to be brave. Kayla curled up beside her carefully, afraid to hurt her, whispering that she missed her every day. Naomi cried too, apologizing over and over for not being there. It was one of the most painful and beautiful moments I had ever witnessed. At the same time, the legal process moved forward relentlessly. Jabari's charges stacked up quickly: abandonment, assault, threats. violations tied to the accident that put Naomi in the coma. Every hearing revealed more of the pattern I had lived with my entire life. His entitlement, his lack of remorse, his belief that consequences were for other people. Our mother tried to insert herself again, calling me in tears, begging me to help Jabari, insisting he was just misunderstood. I told her no. For the first time in my life, I said it without shaking. I told her that if she contacted me again on his behalf, I would block her completely. She accused me of being cruel. I hung up anyway. As Naomi grew stronger, we began planning what life could look like after the dust settled. She couldn't work yet. She couldn't drive. She felt overwhelmed and scared about the future. I told her she and the kids could stay with me as long as they needed. Not as a favor, not temporarily, as a real option. She cried again when I said it. Behind the scenes, Child Protective Services informed me that Jabari's parental rights were under review. His behavior during the investigation, his arrest, and his complete lack of concern for the children weighed heavily against him. Naomi was terrified he might still have control over their lives. I held her hand and told her I wouldn't let that happen. For years, I had survived by staying quiet and small. Now, without planning it, I had become something else entirely. An advocate, a protector, a woman who refused to look away when things got ugly. And for the first time, the people around me didn't see me as the forgotten sister. They saw me as the one who showed up when it mattered most. The court process dragged on longer than anyone wanted. Dates were postponed, motions filed, evidence reviewed. Jabari's public defender tried to frame him as overwhelmed, grieving, misunderstood. Every time I heard that word, misunderstood, something twisted in my stomach. There was nothing misunderstood about abandoning your children while their mother lay unconscious in a hospital bed. There was nothing misunderstood about threats, violence, or entitlement. Naomi attended what hearing she could, often in a wheelchair, her hands trembling as she listened. I sat beside her every time. Andre sat on my other side, a quiet presence, his hand warm on my back whenever things became too heavy. Noah and Kayla stayed with me during those days. They had settled into a routine in my home that felt surprisingly natural. Homework at the kitchen table, movie nights on the couch. Kayla liked helping me cook, standing on a chair and stirring carefully. Noah started opening up more, asking questions about the future he was scared to imagine. They talked about their mother constantly. They worried about her getting tired. They worried about their father coming back. One night, Noah asked me in a small voice if his dad hated them. I told him the truth in a way a child could handle. I told him his father was very sick inside and made choices that hurt people, but that none of it was because of them. He nodded like he wanted to believe me, then asked if his mom would stay with us forever. I told him she could, if that's what she wanted. Latoya disappeared from the picture completely. Once Jabari was behind bars and the consequences became real, she stopped answering calls, stopped showing up, stopped existing in our lives at all. I wasn't surprised. People like her don't stick around when there's nothing left to gain. Our mother made one last attempt to regain control. She showed up at my house unannounced, crying, saying the family was falling apart because of me. She said I had stolen Jabari's children and ruined his life. I looked at her and felt nothing. No anger, no guilt, just clarity. I told her to leave and never come back. When she refused, I called the police. She left that time without another word. Weeks later, the judge made the ruling. Jabari was sentenced to prison. His parental rights were terminated in full. The words echoed in the courtroom, heavy and final. Naomi sobbed quietly beside me, not out of joy, but out of grief for what could have been. I held her as she cried. Andre wrapped his arms around all of us. That day didn't feel like a victory. It felt like an ending, and the beginning of something fragile and uncertain. Afterward, Child Protective Services began the transition process. The kids were officially placed back with their mother, with me as a primary support. Naomi moved into my home while she continued rehabilitation. The house filled with life again, not chaos, but something gentler. Something earned. At night, after the kids were asleep, Naomi and I would sit at the kitchen table drinking tea. She told me about the life she wanted to rebuild. I told her about the childhood I had survived. Somewhere between shared grief and quiet hope, we became something neither of us expected. We became family, by choice. Life didn't magically become easy after the court ruling. Healing never works that way. Naomi had good days and bad ones. Some mornings, she woke up hopeful, determined to reclaim pieces of herself. Other days, she was overwhelmed by guilt, grief, and anger at the man she had once trusted with her life. On those days, she would apologize for needing help, and I would remind her she didn't owe strength to anyone. Noah and Kayla were adjusting too. The fear didn't disappear overnight. Loud noises still startled them. Raised voices made Kayla freeze. Noah became hyper-aware of adult moods, watching faces carefully, as if he was always waiting for the ground to shift beneath him again. I recognized that behavior immediately. I had lived it. We started therapy together. Individual sessions for Naomi, play therapy for Kayla, counseling for Noah, family sessions for all of us. Sitting in that room, hearing professionals validate what I had felt my entire childhood, was both painful and freeing. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't weak. I had been surviving. Andre became the quiet backbone of our household. He never tried to take over or insert himself as a savior. He simply showed up. He fixed things around the house, cooked dinner when I was too tired, sat with Noah during homework when math became frustrating. The kids trusted him quickly, instinctively, the way children do when someone makes them feel safe without demanding anything in return. One night, Kayla asked if she could call me Mom by accident. She froze immediately, eyes wide, terrified she had done something wrong. Naomi's face crumpled, but she smiled through it and told Kayla it was okay, that love didn't have strict rules. I told Kayla she could call me whatever made her feel comfortable. She hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. That was the moment I understood how deeply this had all changed me. I was no longer just reacting to trauma. I was actively building something better in its place. The criminal case against Jabari continued in the background. Sentencing hearings, appeals denied, reports finalized. Each update felt less intense than the last. The man who once loomed so large in my life was shrinking into a distant, irrelevant figure. I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief. The kind that comes when a door finally locks behind you. Our mother tried once more to reach out through a relative, claiming she wanted reconciliation. I declined. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply said no. The peace that followed was worth more than any apology she could have offered. Slowly, joy started to exist again without guilt. We celebrated Naomi's first day driving on her own, Noah's school award, Kayla learning to ride a bike in the driveway, her laughter ringing through the neighborhood. These moments didn't erase the past, but they proved it didn't get to control our future. For the first time, my home felt like something I had never had growing up. It felt safe. There were moments when the weight of everything we had been through caught up to me unexpectedly. A quiet afternoon, a song on the radio, the smell of hospital disinfectant lingering in my memory. Trauma doesn't announce itself politely. It seeps in when your guard is down. On those days, I reminded myself that healing wasn't linear, and neither was forgiveness. I didn't need to forgive Jabari to move forward. I just needed distance, boundaries, and truth. Naomi started physical therapy outside the house a few times a week. Watching her walk unassisted for the first time felt surreal. The kids clapped like it was a graduation ceremony. Noah filmed it on his phone so he could show his friends. Kayla cried and wiped her tears on Naomi's sweater without apology. Those moments stitched something back together inside all of us. As Naomi grew stronger, she began talking about work again, about independence, about what it meant to rebuild a life that had been paused without consent. We sat down one evening and had the hard conversation about the future. Custody, housing, finances. Fear hovered over every word, but so did honesty. She told me she was scared to do this alone. I told her she wouldn't have to. Legally, Jabari's situation was finalized. Prison time. No parental rights. No appeals left standing. The paperwork arrived in a thick envelope that I left unopened for hours. When I finally read it, I felt numb. Closure doesn't always come with relief. Sometimes it comes quietly, like the absence of noise after years of chaos. The kids asked fewer questions about their father as time went on. They asked more about school trips, birthdays, and whether we could get a dog someday. Their priorities shifted the way children should. Toward the present. Toward the future. Away from survival. One night, Noah told me he didn't feel scared going to sleep anymore. He said it casually, like it wasn't a big deal. It was everything. Kayla started sleeping through the night without nightmares. Naomi laughed more, real laughter, not the careful kind that fades quickly. Andre and I would exchange glances across the room during those moments, both of us silently acknowledging how close we had come to losing all of this before it even began. I thought about my own childhood often, about the girl who learned to be small because it was safer. I wished I could go back and tell her that one day she would build a home filled with kindness and stability, that she would become the adult she needed but never had. Instead, I poured that love forward, into homework help, into warm meals, into showing up consistently, without conditions. It turns out breaking cycles doesn't require perfection. It requires commitment. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving the aftermath of someone else's choices. I was living. As time passed, the story that once consumed every waking thought slowly loosened its grip on my life. Not because it didn't matter anymore, but because it no longer defined us. Jabari's name stopped coming up in daily conversation. Court dates were replaced by school calendars. Legal documents were replaced by permission slips taped to the fridge. The crisis phase ended, and the long work of living began. Naomi reached a point where she no longer needed daily assistance. She still had limitations, but she carried herself differently now. Straighter, more sure of herself. Trauma had taken a lot from her, but it had also stripped away illusions. She told me once that waking up from the coma felt like being given a second life, and she intended to live it intentionally. I believed her. We started talking about next steps, whether she wanted her own place eventually, whether staying together made sense long term. We promised each other honesty over obligation. For now, the answer was simple. The kids were thriving. Stability mattered more than appearances. We agreed to take things one season at a time. Andre and I talked privately about how this had changed us too. Marriage isn't tested in calm moments, it's tested in chaos. There were nights we fell into bed exhausted, barely speaking, and mornings we laughed over burned toast like nothing else in the world mattered. We didn't come out of this untouched, but we came out aligned, stronger in ways that didn't need proving. The kids began inviting friends over. Hearing laughter echo through the house still caught me off guard sometimes. Kayla decorated her room with drawings taped crookedly to the walls. Noah joined a school club and asked me to come to his first event. When I showed up, he scanned the room until he saw me, then smiled like he'd been holding his breath. I realized then how much presence matters. Not grand gestures, just showing up when you say you will. Every so often, I'd get updates through official channels about Jabari's incarceration. I never sought them out. I never shared them with the kids. That chapter was closed. Not erased, but contained, where it belonged. One evening, Naomi and I sat on the porch watching the sunset while the kids played in the yard. She thanked me again, quietly, like she always did. I told her she didn't owe me gratitude for doing what was right. She said maybe not, but she wanted me to know I had changed the course of her life. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just sat there with her, letting the moment exist without trying to define it. For years, my family told me I was difficult, dramatic, disposable. Standing there, watching two children laugh freely and a woman reclaim her life, I finally understood how wrong they had been. I wasn't difficult. I was necessary. There is a strange kind of grief that comes after everything settles. Not the sharp, immediate pain, but the quiet realization of what never was. I grieved the brother I never had. I grieved the parents I kept hoping would change. I even grieved the version of myself that believed love had to be earned through silence and compliance. Letting go of those fantasies hurt, but holding on to them would have hurt more. Naomi started talking about the accident more openly as therapy progressed. She remembered fragments, the sound of brakes, Jabari yelling, the feeling of impact. Hearing her talk about it made my stomach twist, but it also solidified something important. None of this was exaggerated. None of it was misunderstanding. The harm was real, and naming it mattered. She stopped defending him long before the legal system ever did. The kids learned to ask for what they needed. At first, it was small things, extra hugs, reassurance before bed. Eventually, it became bigger questions. Why their dad wasn't coming back. Why their grandma wasn't around anymore. We answered honestly, without cruelty. We told them that some adults make choices that aren't safe, and that loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to hurt you. They accepted those answers with the quiet wisdom children often carry when they feel secure. Andre and I made a point to keep our home predictable. Routines mattered. Breakfast together, homework at the same time every day. Sunday evenings for family movies. These weren't grand solutions, but they were anchors. Safety lives in consistency. I noticed changes in myself too. I spoke up more at work. I set boundaries without over-explaining. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. The girl who once learned to shrink was learning, slowly but surely, how to stand. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady. One afternoon, Noah brought home a school assignment about heroes. I expected something about firefighters or athletes. Instead, he wrote about family, about his mom for being strong, about me for protecting them. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom so I could cry without making him uncomfortable. Being seen like that felt overwhelming in the best way. Naomi eventually asked me a question I hadn't considered. She asked if I ever regretted calling Child Protective Services, if I ever wondered whether things could have gone differently. I told her the truth. I regretted the pain it caused the kids in the short term. I did not regret saving them in the long term. Sometimes the right choice hurts before it heals. As the months turned into a new normal, I stopped waiting for disaster. I stopped bracing for the next phone call, the next betrayal. Peace felt unfamiliar at first, like a language I was learning as an adult. But once I started speaking it, I never wanted to go back. For the first time, my life wasn't shaped by fear of what someone else might do next. It was shaped by intention. One of the hardest things I had to learn was that peace can feel boring when you've lived in survival mode for too long. There were days when everything was calm and my body didn't know how to react. No emergencies, no shouting, no chaos, just quiet. I had to teach myself that quiet didn't mean something bad was coming. Sometimes it just meant things were finally okay. Naomi continued rebuilding her independence step by step. She went back to work part-time, nervous but determined. The first morning she left the house on her own, the kids stood by the door like they were sending someone off to the moon. When she came back smiling, exhausted but proud, we celebrated with takeout and too much dessert. Small victories deserve to be treated like big ones. Noah grew into a different version of himself. He smiled more easily. He stopped flinching when adults disagreed. He learned he didn't have to manage everyone's emotions to stay safe. Kayla became louder, sillier, more confident. She danced through the house without worrying about being in the way. Watching that transformation was one of the greatest privileges of my life. Andre and I talked about the future often, about whether we wanted children of our own someday, about how this experience had reshaped what family meant to us. There was no pressure, no urgency, just honesty. We both agreed on one thing without hesitation. Whatever our future looked like, it would be built on safety and respect, not fear. Occasionally, reminders of the past tried to creep back in. A letter from the court, a notification about Jabari's incarceration status, a relative asking invasive questions. Each time, I chose myself. I chose boundaries. I chose not to reopen doors that nearly destroyed me. That choice got easier with practice. Naomi eventually found her own place nearby. Not because she had to leave, but because she was ready. The kids stayed with me often, bouncing between homes that felt secure and familiar. We didn't frame it as separation. We framed it as expansion. More love, more space, more support. The day Naomi moved into her apartment, Kayla asked if this meant everything was normal again. I thought about it for a moment before answering. I told her it meant something better than normal. It meant healthy. She seemed satisfied with that. That night, after everyone went home, I walked through my quiet house and felt something settle in my chest. Not sadness, not fear, just gratitude. Gratitude for the version of myself who finally chose courage over comfort. Gratitude for the people who stayed. Gratitude for the life that grew out of something so painful. I didn't need my past to disappear to move forward. I just needed it to stop controlling the narrative. And for the first time, it truly had. There are still days when I catch myself replaying old moments, wondering how things could have gone so wrong for so long without anyone stopping it sooner. I think about how many signs were ignored, how much harm was excused because it was easier to look away than to intervene. But I don't stay there anymore. Reflection no longer traps me. It informs me. Naomi and I developed a rhythm that felt almost instinctive. We supported each other without hovering. We checked in without prying. Trauma had taught us both how fragile stability can be, and we protected it carefully. When one of us felt overwhelmed, the other stepped in without judgment. There was no competition, no resentment. Just mutual respect built through shared hardship. Noah and Kayla continued to surprise me with their resilience. Kids don't heal because they forget. They heal because someone finally makes them feel safe enough to grow. Noah started talking about college someday, about becoming someone who helps people. Kayla announced she wanted to be an artist and covered my fridge in drawings of our family, always placing herself right in the center, smiling. That detail alone told me more than words ever could. Andre once told me he admired the way I handled everything, and I had to sit with that for a long time. Admiration was unfamiliar territory. Growing up, I was praised only when I was useful, never when I was strong. Learning to accept appreciation without deflecting it felt like learning a new language. But I was learning. We marked the passing of time in gentle ways. Birthdays celebrated without tension. Holidays that didn't feel like emotional minefields. Even the silence between conversations felt comfortable instead of threatening. I stopped waiting for someone to ruin things. I stopped expecting love to be followed by punishment. The last legal notice regarding Jabari arrived quietly, without ceremony. Final confirmations, no further appeals, no contact permitted. I placed the envelope in a drawer and closed it without drama. That chapter had no power left over me. It existed only as context, not as a future threat. Sometimes people ask how I found the strength to do what I did. I never know how to answer that. Strength wasn't something I found. It was something that emerged when there was no other choice. When staying silent became more dangerous than speaking up. I didn't become someone new through all of this. I became who I had always been, without the weight of fear pressing me into a smaller shape. And every day, I wake up grateful that I didn't let entitlement, cruelty, or blood ties dictate the life I chose to build. Looking back now, I understand that entitlement thrives in silence. It grows when people are protected from consequences and taught that their needs will always matter more than anyone else's pain. Jabari was enabled at every turn, praised when he should have been corrected, defended when he should have been stopped. By the time reality caught up with him, the damage was already deep and far-reaching. I used to blame myself for not speaking up sooner, for not cutting contact earlier, for hoping things would magically improve. But hindsight is cruel that way. I did the best I could with the tools I had at the time. Survival taught me to endure, not to confront. It took years, therapy, and one irreversible crisis to unlearn that lesson. I no longer confuse endurance with strength. Naomi once told me that waking up from the coma felt like opening her eyes in a life she barely recognized. The man she trusted was gone. Her body felt unfamiliar. Her future looked uncertain. And yet, she said the kindness she was met with afterward changed everything. Not grand gestures, but consistency. Being believed. Being supported without conditions. She said that was what saved her. The kids continue to grow in ways that feel almost miraculous when I remember where they started. They argue over chores now. They complain about homework. They roll their eyes at my reminders. Ordinary childhood frustrations that once felt impossible are now routine. Every time that happens, I feel a quiet sense of victory. Ordinary means safe. Andre and I learned something fundamental through all of this. Love is not proven through sacrifice alone. It's proven through protection, through boundaries, through choosing each other, even when outside pressure tries to pull you apart. We didn't lose ourselves in this process. We defined ourselves more clearly. I don't tell this story for sympathy. I tell it because entitlement doesn't always look loud at first. Sometimes it looks like charm, like favoritism, like family loyalty twisted into obligation. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is refuse to play your assigned role any longer. I was never meant to be the quiet one who absorbed everyone else's damage. I was meant to interrupt the cycle, and I did. Even now, there are moments when I catch myself standing in the doorway of my own home, listening to the sounds inside and feeling disbelief, laughter, movement, life continuing without tension lurking underneath it. For so long, I believed peace was temporary, something fragile that could be taken away at any moment. Now I know better. Peace is built, protected, and chosen daily. Naomi has fully stepped into her new life. She is stronger, more confident, and no longer defined by what was done to her. Watching her reclaim herself has been one of the most powerful things I have ever witnessed. Noah and Kayla are thriving in ways that once felt impossible. They feel secure. They feel wanted. They feel loved. And that is everything. Jabari is no longer a presence in our lives. He is where he belongs, facing the consequences of his choices. His parental rights are gone, permanently. The cycle he continued has finally been broken. Not through revenge, but through accountability. Our mother is no longer part of my world either. Letting go of her was painful, but necessary. I learned that protecting your peace sometimes means walking away from people who share your blood but not your values. I no longer carry guilt for that decision. I carry clarity. Andre and I continue to build a life grounded in respect, honesty, and safety. This experience didn't tear us apart. It revealed who we were when things were hard, and that knowledge is something I will always be grateful for. If you listened all the way to the end, thank you. It truly means more to me than you know. Before we wrap up, go ahead and like this video and share it if the story blessed you. I didn't save anyone alone. I stood up when it mattered, and I refused to stay silent. Sometimes that is enough to change everything. For another story that fits your mood, click the video on the left. To hear the latest one, choose the video on the right.
Thank you for listening to this story until the end. Hopefully every moment in the story has touched your heart, brought you some reflection, some emotion, and hope. Thank you for taking the time to experience it with us, and hope that each next story will always accompany you on your life journey.